"What are you doing here in this cold, Maya?" The words slipped from Charles Whitaker's mouth before he could register the weight they carried. It was late, too late, for anyone to be out in the frigid night, and the park was silent, except for the crunch of his polished shoes against the thin crust of snow. He almost walked past the bench, another homeless figure sleeping under layers of worn clothing. In New York, you saw them everywhere. And over the years, Charles had trained himself not to look. Not really. It wasn't cruelty, it was habit, defense, a way to preserve the narrow tunnel of focus that had made him a millionaire. But something about this particular shape, something in the way the small frame curled, the familiar worn-out canvas bag tucked against her side, stopped him. He slowed, half annoyed at his own sudden hesitation, and then looked again. His heart skipped. The streetlight flickered, casting enough glow to reveal the outline of her face. The unruly curls, the slight slope of her cheek. Recognition struck him like ice water. "Maya?" he breathed. She didn't move. He stepped closer, cautiously, unwilling to believe his instinct. "Maya, what in God's name?" He dropped to one knee. The woman on the bench was Maya Williams. No mistake, his former housekeeper. The same quiet, invisible presence who had worked in his home for 2 years. The one he had fired 3 weeks ago for being 5 minutes late. "Maya, it's Charles," he said softly, his breath fogging the air. "Open your eyes, please." No response. Her lips were blue. Her fingers, exposed in the cold, gripped something tightly. Gently, Charles unwrapped them, heart pounding. Inside her palm was a crumpled receipt, a hospital billing statement. He smoothed it out under the street lamp. St. Agnes Medical Center. Patient, Dolores Williams. Outstanding balance, $1,432. Final due date, December 20. Next to the paper, in her hand, was a small bundle of cash. Singles, a few fives. Maybe $80 in total. Clutched like it was her last lifeline. Charles froze. The memory came rushing back 3 weeks ago, that cold morning. He'd been irritated. His breakfast wasn't ready, the papers weren't organized, and Maya had come through the door a few minutes late, her hair damp with sweat, eyes ringed with exhaustion. She had mumbled something about sorry, the train was late. He hadn't asked questions. He'd simply said, "You're fired," and went back to stirring his coffee. Now, kneeling on this bench, with her unconscious, her body shivering beneath a thin coat, he understood. She hadn't overslept. She had been working a second job, likely all night, probably in a diner or a warehouse, some graveyard shift to make ends meet, to pay this bill, for her mother. Charles looked at the bill again. The due date was 2 days ago. His throat tightened. Fumbling, he yanked off his coat and wrapped it around Maya's body. "Hang on," he whispered. "Just hold on, Maya." He pulled out his phone. 911, yes. "I need an ambulance." Central Park, near the 76th Street entrance. "A woman, she's unconscious. She's freezing." As he gave the details, he kept glancing at her face, willing her eyes to open. The ambulance arrived minutes later, red lights casting eerie shadows across the white snow. EMTs jumped out. One of them, a middle-aged woman, gave Charles a quick look. "She's hypothermic," she said after a quick assessment. "If you hadn't called." Charles didn't need the end of that sentence. "I know her," he said quietly. "She worked for me. I had no idea." "She's lucky you came by," the medic replied, with a note of unspoken criticism. They loaded Maya into the ambulance. Charles hesitated, then stepped in behind her. At St. Luke's. He sat in the waiting room under flickering fluorescent lights, his overcoat gone, his silk shirt soaked in the chill. He didn't care. He clutched the hospital bill in his hand like it was an indictment. In many ways, it was. Hours passed. Finally, a young doctor approached. "She's stable. We're warming her up. She'll need rest, but she should recover. Can I see her?" "She's unconscious, but yes, briefly." Charles entered the room quietly. Maya lay still, her breathing shallow, but no longer ragged. Her face, framed in medical tape and tubes, looked so small, so tired. He sat beside her. "I didn't know," he whispered. "That's no excuse. I didn't ask. I didn't care." He placed the hospital bill and the crumpled money gently on the nightstand, along with his card. On the back, He scribbled, "You should never have had to fight this alone. I see you now. Let me help." He stared at her one last time before turning to leave. A sharp ache lodged in his chest. Not just guilt, but something deeper. A memory of his own mother, from long ago, when she, too, had needed help and no one came. Tonight, the world had forced him to look. And for the first time in a very long time, Charles Whitaker could not look away. 3 weeks earlier, the Whitaker residence stood as it always did, quiet, immaculate, and hollow. The marble floors reflected the morning sunlight in sterile perfection. In the kitchen, copper pots hung undisturbed above an island too pristine to ever show signs of actual cooking. The house was maintained with a precision Charles insisted upon, but rarely noticed. At precisely 7 a.m., Charles Whitaker descended the curved staircase, adjusting his cufflinks as he checked his phone. His assistant had already emailed the latest stock movements, and his mind was calculating profit margins before his feet touched the first floor. He entered the kitchen. The breakfast tray was not there. He frowned. In the carefully timed world Charles had constructed for himself, routine was sacred. He glanced at the oven clock, 7:03, 3 minutes behind. The irritation was instant. He called out, "Maya?" No response. Another minute passed before the back door creaked open. Maya stepped inside, her coat damp with sweat, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to remove her gloves. Her eyes, rimmed with fatigue, widened when she saw him standing there. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered. "The train was delayed. I tried." "You were late," he interrupted coldly. "That's unacceptable." "I didn't mean to," she began, voice soft, desperate. "I don't want to hear excuses, Maya." He waved a hand dismissively. "You're fired. Pack your things." Her face went still. There was no outburst, no tears. She simply lowered her head, nodded once, and turned quietly toward the stairs to gather her belongings. She didn't plead. She didn't explain. Charles poured himself coffee and checked his stocks. That afternoon, the agency sent over a temporary cleaner. She was chatty, over-perfumed, and lacked the quiet competence Maya had brought to the job. Charles noticed but didn't comment. By the following week, he had already forgotten what day Maya left. But Maya hadn't forgotten. That morning, she'd just come off an all-night shift at a warehouse cleaning floors. Her eyes were swollen, her legs ached, but she'd wanted to squeeze in those extra hours just enough to make one more payment toward her mother's mounting hospital bills. She had barely missed the train back, 5 minutes too late. And just like that, everything unraveled. After being dismissed, Maya had nowhere to go. Her lease had expired the month prior, and she'd been staying quietly in the storage room near the laundry area in the Whitaker mansion, an unspoken arrangement she hoped would last until spring. Charles never asked where she went at night, and she never offered. There was dignity in silence. Now, with no job and nowhere to sleep, she turned to emergency shelters. Most were full, others too dangerous. She began sleeping in corners of the cities she thought were safer: library lobbies, bus terminals. The bench in Central Park, near where her mother once loved to feed pigeons, had felt oddly comforting, familiar, but the nights had turned colder, her coat thinner. And the deadline for her mother's hospital payment drew closer. Still, she refused to beg. She worked when she could, cleaning kitchens at night, folding linens at a motel by dawn. Every dollar she earned went toward that folded invoice in her coat pocket. She didn't blame Charles. Men like him didn't see women like her. In his world, service was invisible. Gratitude, a currency too minor to matter. Back in the present, Charles sat in his office, the morning after Maya was admitted to the hospital. He hadn't slept. The hospital bill still lay on his desk, flattened now, the creases smoothed out. He read the due date again, his mouth dry. The 20th of December. It was today. He leaned back, eyes scanning the ceiling, remembering the day he fired her, the way she had bowed her head and walked away without a word. He hadn't even asked where she lived. He hadn't wondered why someone so reliable was suddenly late. His mind drifted further, to his mother's face. She had been kind, hardworking, a nurse in Queens. After his father died, she raised him alone, juggling shifts, skipping meals. One year, the heating in their building failed during a brutal winter. She caught pneumonia and refused to stop working. She collapsed during her shift, too stubborn to ask for help. By the time Charles was able to find her at the shelter, it was too late. He had buried her, then buried the pain under ambition and acquisition. He told himself that success was survival. And yet, here he was again. Another woman, another bench, another kind soul who refused to ask for help. Charles stood abruptly and reached for his coat. He had somewhere to be. At St. Agnes Medical Center, the receptionist recognized him immediately. Money had a way of announcing itself, but Charles wasn't here to command attention. He approached the billing office and handed over his credit card. "I'm here to pay the balance for Dolores Williams," he said simply. The clerk blinked, tapped keys. "You're a relative?" Number just someone who should have asked more questions. If this moment touched your heart, hit like to show your support, and drop a comment with your city or state. You might be surprised how many people near you are watching this very same story right now. Payment cleared. He turned and walked down the hall toward Maya's room. The nurse at the desk looked up but didn't stop him. He knocked once before entering. Maya was awake now, propped up by pillows, her skin pale but warmer. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Mr. Whitaker?" He nodded. "I stopped by earlier, but you were asleep. I wanted to make sure you were okay." She said nothing. Her hands rested on the blanket, fingers curled like she still expected to hold something that could be taken away. "I saw the bill," he added. "It's handled, completely." Her lips parted. "Why would you? I should have asked you why you were late. I should have noticed. I didn't. That's on me." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I didn't want charity," she said softly. "This isn't charity," Charles replied. "It's acknowledgement of your dignity, of your worth, of the truth I ignored." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small folder. "This is my offer. I want you to come back, not as a maid, as director of employee welfare. I need someone who knows what being unseen feels like." Maya looked at him for a long moment, the hurt and disbelief slowly folding into something else. "Hope." He stood to leave, pausing at the door. "Take your time. I'll be here." Outside the hospital, snow had begun to fall again, soft, quiet, covering the city in the possibility of something new. Maya hadn't spoken much since Charles left the hospital room. She sat still for hours, the folder resting untouched on the tray table beside her. She didn't open it. Not yet. Not because she didn't care, but because something inside her still feared this was all temporary, a fluke, a wave of guilt that would soon pass. Offers came with conditions, and Maya had lived too long on the edge of society to believe in miracles without caution. She stared out the window as the city lights blurred behind snowfall. Somewhere out there, bills were still due. People were still invisible. And the world kept turning, uncaring. A week later, she left the hospital with a clean bill of health and nowhere to go. Shelters were full again, and the rooms she could afford for a night smelled of mold and desperation. She stood outside a corner deli, clutching a warm coffee in both hands, when a sleek black town car pulled to the curb. She flinched slightly when she saw Charles step out, dressed more simply than usual in a dark wool coat and scarf. "Maya," he said gently, his voice almost uncertain, "I know you didn't respond to my offer. That's okay. But I didn't come to talk about work." She looked at him warily. "I came to take you home." She didn't answer. "You don't have to say yes to the job, or anything," he added quickly, "but you're not sleeping outside again. That's not a request. That's me not failing twice." For a long moment, the cold wind swirled between them. Maya finally nodded once, slowly. The ride was quiet. The car smelled of leather and cedar, and Maya pressed her fingers against the heating vent, soaking in warmth. When they pulled up to the Whitaker residence, her breath caught slightly. It looked the same, grand, intimidating, empty. He opened the front door, ushering her in. The warmth of the house wrapped around her like a reluctant memory. She expected to be led to the back quarters, to the staff wing, or perhaps a spare room upstairs. Instead, Charles gestured toward the sunroom off the main hall. "This is yours. Stay here as long as you want. No expectations." Maya blinked. The room was bright, filled with soft yellow light even in winter. A small fireplace crackled gently. A bed had been set up in the corner. Not a cot or a guest bed, but a real one with a quilt, side table, even a vase of dried lavender. "This was my mother's favorite room," Charles said, voice low. "She liked morning light, said it made the day feel possible." Maya stepped inside, still unsure. That night, she lay awake listening to the house settle. It groaned in soft waves, the hum of old plumbing, the creak of wood beneath its polished floors. But it was no longer the sound of servitude. For the first time, it didn't feel like she was trespassing. Yet sleep didn't come easily. Memory did. 3 weeks ago, she had slept beneath the staircase, not in an assigned room, but in the unused laundry storage. It was small, dark, and always cold, but she'd kept it clean. The mattress had been just a folded blanket atop old towels. She never told anyone. Charles didn't ask. No one did. She rose before sunrise, slipped out before anyone noticed. She had thought, foolishly, that if she worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, she could save her mother and one day rent a place near the river where they could sit on a porch and drink sweet tea in peace. But life hadn't allowed that kind of dreaming. Now she was in the sunroom. The next morning, Charles knocked before entering, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He set one beside her and sat in the chair across the room. He didn't say anything for a while. "I found your old sleeping bag," he said finally. "In the laundry closet." Maya didn't look at him. "I didn't know you lived there. Not really. I assumed you had a place." "You never asked," she said simply. He nodded. "You're right. I didn't. I'm trying to change that now." They drank coffee in silence. "I keep thinking about how many things I didn't see," he continued. "How many people I never looked at. My mother, she used to say that kindness wasn't just about giving, it was about noticing. Seeing the unseen." Maya looked up at him, something softening in her expression. "Your mother sounds like she had good eyes." "She did," he said quietly, "and I didn't inherit them. Not until recently." She smiled slightly, but said nothing more. Later that day, she walked the halls of the house again, not as a servant, but as someone beginning to feel weight in her steps. She stopped outside the old laundry room, pushed the door open. The mattress was still there, folded. A box with her name scribbled in marker rested on top. Inside were a few clothes, her mother's framed photo, and the hospital invoice now marked paid in bold red letters. She touched the corner of the frame gently. That night, she opened the folder Charles had given her in the hospital. The job offer was legitimate, generous even. Director of Employee Welfare, salary, benefits, the works. A handwritten note was tucked inside. "You've seen this house more clearly than I ever have. Help me change it from the inside." She folded the note carefully, set it beside her mother's picture, and sat quietly for a long time. When Charles passed by later, he noticed the light still on in the sunroom. He knocked once. "I won't push," he said, "but I wanted to know. What are you thinking?" She looked up at him and held his gaze. "I'm thinking maybe some houses are worth reopening," she said, "but only if we stop pretending they were ever whole." He nodded, slowly. "I can work with that," he said, and for the first time, there was something in his voice that felt less like apology and more like promise. The next Monday morning, Maya stood before the front entrance of Whitaker Enterprises headquarters. The towering glass facade gleamed beneath the winter sun, each panel reflecting the buzzing, fast-paced world inside. She hesitated, fingers gripping the strap of her modest leather handbag. A stream of suited professionals passed her by without notice, some on phones, some half-running, all with eyes locked forward. Invisible, just like she used to be. But this time, she wasn't walking in to clean the floors. She stepped inside, shoulders squared, heart pounding in her chest. At the front desk, a young receptionist with a clipped tone asked for her name. When Maya gave it, the woman did a double take before gesturing toward the executive elevator. "Mr. Whitaker said to bring you straight up." The ride to the top floor felt longer than it should have, even though it was only seconds. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing a wide hallway lined with black and white photographs of the company's legacy men in suits shaking hands, ribbon cuttings, charts of growth. Charles was waiting for her at the end of the corridor. "Good morning," he said, offering a tentative smile. He was dressed more casually than she remembered, no tie, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked like a man trying to be reachable, not revered. "Morning," she replied. I set up your office 2 doors down from mine, he said, guiding her past the gleaming boardroom. But feel free to redesign the space. It's just temporary, until you make it yours. Maya said nothing. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, just full, heavy with things still unspoken. They entered her office. It was modest by executive standards, but large and sunlit, with views of the river. A computer sat on the desk, a fresh notepad, a pen set untouched. A vase of lavender, like the one in her sunroom, had been placed near the window. Charles gestured toward a file on the desk. These are the current employee wellness stats. We have a basic HR system health insurance, paid leave, but there's been no real support beyond that. I want you to change that. Maya raised an eyebrow. And what exactly do you want me to change? I hesitated. Culture, awareness, compassion. You want me to fix the heart of the company? She said, a touch of dry humor. He smiled faintly. Maybe. Or help us find it. She sat down, running her fingers over the folder. I'll need to speak to the staff, all levels, not just the managers. Whatever you need. I'll need access to the housekeeping and janitorial rosters. His smile widened. Already printed. Maya looked around once more. The view was stunning, but she didn't care for skylines. She cared for stories, for names, for people like Marlene, the night cleaner who worked 2 jobs and had varicose veins the size of ropes but still brought extra lunch to share. For Edgar, who polished marble floors with aching knees and sang blues tunes under his breath when no one listened. She stood. I'll start today. Charles nodded. One more thing. She turned back. If you ever feel I'm overstepping, tell me. I'm not here to manage you. I'm here to learn. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Good, because I don't plan on walking on eggshells. Wouldn't expect you to. By noon, Maya had already visited 3 departments. She bypassed HR and headed straight to custodial. The lower levels of the building, once familiar terrain to her, hadn't changed. The scent of bleach, the clatter of carts, the hum of ignored labor. A few staff members stared as she walked in wearing tailored slacks and a professional blouse. One woman whispered, not recognizing her at first, but when Maya turned and smiled, a wave of recognition followed. Maya? Someone gasped. Yeah, she said, hands tucked in her pockets. It's me. You look different, Marlene said, squinting through her glasses. Still the same, Maya replied, then added, just warmer. Laughter broke the tension. She sat with them in the break room, listening to their concerns. Overworked schedules, no paid overtime, worn equipment, no communication from HR unless there was a mistake. One man said, they know our names when something's broken, but never when something works. Maya took notes, not on a laptop, on paper. She asked about families, about what they did after work. She made no promises, just listened, and she didn't leave until every voice had been heard. That evening, she returned home exhausted, but clear-headed. She walked into the sunroom to find Charles there, setting down a tray of tea. I figured you'd be back late, he said. Thought you might want chamomile. She smiled faintly. You're getting better at this human thing. He chuckled, working on it. They sat by the window. I spent the day downstairs, Maya said. Same people, same fatigue, different silence. He nodded slowly. That silence used to protect me. Now it scares me. She looked at him. The people who keep this company running, they're invisible until they fall. Then you wonder why no one said anything. You're saying we need to start seeing them. I'm saying you need to listen when they speak. He leaned back, thoughtful. We'll need to change more than policy. Exactly. She paused. Charles, what made you come to the park that night? He hesitated. I don't know. Something felt wrong, like I'd missed something important. You didn't miss it, she said. You ignored it. For years. He looked away, ashamed. I know. She softened slightly. But you saw me. That night. That counts for something. They sat in silence, sipping tea. Outside, snow fell again, cloaking the city in hush and hope. Inside, something unfamiliar began to grow, a partnership. Not built on pity, not bound by debt, but anchored in responsibility, in vision, and in a slow, steady reckoning. For the first time in years, the house did not feel so hollow. nor did the halls of Whitaker Enterprises, because Maya had begun to speak, and this time, someone was listening. By the end of her second week as Director of Employee Welfare, Maya had learned more than Charles probably ever wanted her to. And it wasn't from spreadsheets or board meetings, it was from late-night conversations in the janitor's closet, whispered complaints in elevator rides, and shared lunches over vending machine sandwiches. There was rot beneath the polish. On the surface, Whitaker Enterprises was the picture of corporate success, quarterly growth, rising stock prices, sleek press releases. But beneath that glassy exterior was a workforce stretched too thin, voices muffled by fear of being replaced. Maya found stories of overlooked injuries, unpaid overtime, managers who used threats to maintain order, and a disturbing number of staff with no access to health care despite being told they were part-time. She brought this up one Friday morning in Charles's office. "There's a janitor named Hector who's been here 9 years, she said, setting a file on his desk. "He works 42 hours a week, but his contract still says 35, so he doesn't qualify for benefits." Charles frowned. How is that possible? His supervisor told him to clock out early and finish the shift anyway. Said it was just how things worked around here. Charles leaned back, rubbing his temples. Jesus. I also spoke to Danielle in maintenance. She hasn't taken a sick day in a year because she's afraid if she does, someone younger will replace her. Her hands are swollen from joint pain, and she doesn't even mention it to her boss. He was silent for a long moment. Then, "I didn't build a company that runs on fear." Maya met his gaze. "But you inherited one that does, and for a while, you let it grow." Charles nodded grimly. "What do you need from me?" "First, protection. If I start shaking things, I need your full support, and I need it visible, not just in private." "Done." "Second, access to internal audits. Full HR files. I need to know what's buried before it buries someone else." "You'll have it." She stood, gathering her things. "Third, let me lead this my way." He smiled faintly. That one was always assumed. Later that day, Maya called her first cross-department listening session. Held not in the boardroom, but in the employee cafeteria. No suits, no titles. She stood before the room with nothing but a notepad and a promise. "Speak freely. Nothing said here will be punished. Everything said here will be heard." At first, there was silence. Then murmurs. Then truth. A young mailroom assistant stood up and talked about being yelled at by his manager in front of clients. A cafeteria cook described the broken freezer that leaked for 6 weeks before being fixed by a temporary hire paid in cash. A groundskeeper admitted he often brought his own gloves because the company ones were moldy. By the end of the session, Maya had 10 pages of notes and a heart heavy with responsibility. That evening, Charles visited her office. She was still at her desk, rereading comments. "You're staying late," he said gently. "So are you," she replied without looking up. He took a seat across from her. "I got a call from Brian in HR. Said you made some bold suggestions about restructuring." I said we need to replace 2 floor managers and revise oversight policies. HR can't keep pretending turnover is just normal attrition. It's not normal. It's people leaving because they're exhausted or humiliated. And the budget? Cut from executive travel. No more company golf retreats for people who've never met their janitorial staff. Charles smirked. "I may lose friends. You'll gain something better." He nodded. "Keep going." There was a pause. "Do you ever wonder," Maya asked quietly, "why people like me don't speak up sooner?" Charles looked up. "Fear? That's part of it. But it's also knowing that when we do speak, nobody listens. Or worse, they say they will. And nothing changes. You say you want to help. I believe that. But if you stop at sympathy, this whole thing becomes just another chapter in a rich man's guilt trip." He absorbed the words, his expression unreadable. "I'm not going to stop," he said finally. "This matters. You matter." Maya exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Then we'll do it together," she said. The next week, the first employee town hall was announced mandatory for all management, optional for staff. Maya insisted it be live-streamed. Transparency wasn't a suggestion. It was a new rule. At the podium, Charles spoke first. He looked out at his staff, not just the department heads or VPs, but the kitchen workers, mail clerks, building attendants. I used to think a good company was measured by its profits, he said. But I've come to realize it's measured by how it treats the people who keep it standing. He gestured to Maya, standing to the side. This is Maya Williams. She's not just your new director of welfare. She's the future of how we lead. If you don't respect her, you don't belong here. A quiet murmur passed through the crowd. It was the kind of statement few executives made, and fewer still meant. Maya stepped forward. I'm not here to clean up after messes anymore, she began. I'm here to prevent them. I'm here because for too long, voices like mine were ignored. That stops now. Applause came hesitantly, then stronger. After the meeting, a janitor named Ernest approached her. He looked old enough to be her father, his hands rough from decades of work. I've been here since your boss was in diapers, he said. Never seen anyone say what you just said. Maya smiled. It was time someone did. He nodded slowly, eyes moist. About damn time. That night, Charles walked into the sunroom and found Maya staring at the fire, sipping tea. You were brilliant today, he said. I wasn't trying to be, she replied. I was just telling the truth. Sometimes, that's the most powerful thing. She looked over. You ever think, maybe this place can really change? He considered. I think change starts small, but it ripples. She nodded, gaze drifting back to the fire. Outside, the city shimmered with winter stillness. Inside, something old had cracked, but something new was taking root. And for once, the halls of power no longer felt like places of silence, but spaces where the truth could finally echo. 2 days after the town hall, Maya returned to the executive floor to find her nameplate on the door replaced with a simple brass plaque that read, Director of People First. She smiled wryly, suspecting Charles had made the change himself. A nice gesture, but one that wouldn't mean anything unless it carried weight beyond the hallway. Her inbox was full. Some messages were simple thank yous from junior staffers. Others were more cautious managers requesting meetings, questioning protocol shifts, citing HR manuals like shields. But the most curious message came with no subject line, just a 3-word email from an address she didn't recognize. He's watching you. Maya blinked at the screen. She reread it, then deleted it, assuming it was some disgruntled employee's poor attempt at intimidation. She had received worse, in other forms, for far less. She didn't mention it to Charles. That morning, she scheduled 3 department visits: IT, client services, and the security division. Each had shown signs of imbalance in her internal audit. Maya believed that abuse didn't flourish only in ignored corners. It often wore suits and carried briefcases. In the IT wing, a young engineer named Sean explained that upper-level developers were regularly borrowing credit for code written by juniors. They call it streamlining, he said bitterly, but it's just theft. Another woman mentioned she hadn't been promoted in 3 years, despite training her replacements. I've been told I'm too quiet to lead, she said. I thought performance mattered more than personality. Maya wrote down every word. In client services, one woman cried when Maya asked about her schedule. They make us work Saturdays with no notice, she said. If you say no, they cut your hours the next week. But if you complain to HR, suddenly your name's missing from the promotion list. By the time Maya reached security, she wasn't surprised to find a tense atmosphere. The department head, Mason Langley, was polite but cold. We run a tight ship here, he said, arms folded across his chest. I'm not sure what you're looking for. I'm not looking, Maya replied evenly. I'm listening. He didn't offer a chair. Still, Maya spoke to the guards, those who worked nights, those posted in sublevels, those rarely spoken to. One of them, Luis, hesitated before pulling her aside. Miss Williams, he whispered. I don't want trouble, but there's something strange. She leaned in. Go on. There's a room, basement level 3, not on the blueprints. We're told not to go near it, but I've seen people enter late at night. Suits, not janitors, not tech. What kind of people? Don't know, but once, I saw Mr. Langley go in with a briefcase. Came out without it. Maya's pulse quickened. She nodded once. Thank you, that's helpful. That evening, she stayed late at the office. The building emptied slowly, floor by floor, until the only sound was the occasional hum of the cleaning crew's vacuum down the hall. She pulled up the internal security map. and traced the levels. Sub-basement 3 wasn't labeled. No cameras, no logs. She called Charles. "I need you to meet me at the office. Alone." To his credit, he arrived within the hour. "What is it?" he asked, concern lining his features. "There's a room 3 levels below ground, unmarked. Security's been told to avoid it. No documentation. I think something's happening down there." Charles stiffened. "That floor was built during a renovation 10 years ago. For storage, I think. Langley oversees it." Maya held up her hand. "I don't want speculation. I want the truth." "Then let's go find it." Together, they took the service elevator to sub-basement 2, then descended a narrow metal staircase. The air grew colder with each step, and the lighting dimmed. The final door was thick steel, painted gray, no signage, no keypad, just a mechanical lock. Charles used his master key. Inside, the room was dimly lit, industrial lighting flickering above stacked metal shelves. But along the back wall, hidden behind a false panel, they discovered a smaller room, windowless, soundproofed. And inside that room, documents. Boxes of them. Paper records of employee evaluations. Termination recommendations with notes like, "too vocal" or "uncooperative." Confidential settlements paid to employees who had filed complaints, most of them women, most involving harassment or discrimination. Maya's breath caught. "This isn't just negligence," she whispered. "It's active suppression." Charles stared at the boxes in silence, his jaw tight. Langley had been using the room as a quiet vault for burying the company's sins, and no one had questioned him because no one thought to look. Maya turned to Charles. "You want to fix this company? Start by cleaning your house." He didn't argue. That night, an emergency meeting was called with legal counsel. Langley was suspended pending investigation. A third-party audit team was brought in. But Maya didn't stop there. She went back through every name on those papers. She called them. She apologized. Some hung up. Others listened in silence. A few cried. One woman said, "I thought I'd imagined the whole thing, that maybe I deserved it." "You didn't," Maya said. "None of you did." The following week, Whitaker Enterprises publicly released a statement acknowledging internal failures in handling employee misconduct. It was not a press-polished apology. It was raw, pointed, and signed by Charles and Maya both. Some media praised the courage. Others questioned the timing. But inside the company, people began to walk taller, speak louder. Maya, meanwhile, became both respected and feared. The staff called her the mirror behind her back, because when she showed up, people were forced to see themselves clearly. One evening, as she walked through the now brightened basement hallway, she passed Luis, the security guard. "You shook the floor, ma'am," he said with a grin. "Sometimes you have to," Maya replied. "If the cracks are too quiet, they keep spreading." He nodded. Back upstairs, Charles met her at the elevator. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing what I didn't." "I wasn't seeing," she said. "I was remembering." He looked at her curiously. "I lived in the shadows," she continued, "and I know what it feels like when no one opens a door." Now, she was building doors, unlocking them, holding them wide, because justice didn't come from the top. It came from below where the cracks first began to speak. The next Monday morning brought an eerie calm. After the revelations of the hidden basement room, after Langley's swift suspension and the rollout of a third-party audit, the Whitaker Enterprises building had changed not in its walls, but in its rhythm. People whispered less and asked more. Employees who once averted eye contact now looked Maya directly in the face, some with cautious hope, others with admiration. But something had shifted beneath the surface. That morning, Maya rode the elevator alone. For the first time since her return, the silence felt heavy, not with fear, but with anticipation. She noticed small things: maintenance carts moving more frequently, unfamiliar faces in expensive suits, executives pacing more than usual. At 10:15 a.m., she received a call from the audit team's lead investigator. "We've hit resistance," he said. "Certain departments have blocked access to older records. Some logs are missing." "Which departments?" "Finance, legal, and oddly marketing." Maya narrowed her eyes. What would marketing be hiding? Possibly internal memos about whistleblowers or spin strategies for legal issues. But it's more than that. There are encrypted files we can't open. Someone tried to erase activity logs yesterday. Langley again? Unclear. We're looking into who else had clearance. But this goes beyond just one man. After the call, Maya went straight to Charles's office. He looked up from his desk. I know. I just got briefed. Someone's covering tracks, she said, or trying to slow us down long enough for damage control. She hesitated. There's something else. I got another anonymous email this morning. Same style as the last. No subject. Just one line. Not all ghosts are buried. Charles frowned. Threat? Possibly a warning. Or a confession. He stood and walked to the window. How far do you want to take this, Maya? All the way. He nodded. Then we don't blink. They called for an emergency executive session. The board members, visibly uncomfortable, gathered in the main conference room. Maya sat beside Charles at the head of the table. Let's not pretend we're here to discuss quarterly reports, she began. You all know why we're here. The CFO, a thin man with sharp glasses named Prescott, cleared his throat. Miss Williams, with all due respect, your recent initiatives have caused unrest. We've lost 2 mid-level executives to resignation. Productivity has slowed. Are you suggesting that cleaning up unethical behavior is bad for business? Prescott flinched. I'm suggesting we proceed cautiously. Maya stared him down. We proceed thoroughly. People aren't resigning because of chaos, they're resigning because they finally got caught. Another board member, older and more measured, leaned forward. There's talk among investors. They're unsure if this new direction aligns with the firm's identity. Charles spoke now, calm but firm. If integrity isn't part of our identity, then we've been selling the wrong brand. Maya added, you've had decades of stability built on silence. I'm here to introduce a new era, one built on truth, even when it hurts. By the end of the meeting, the room had split, some nodding in agreement, others visibly seething. But the board voted in favor of continuing the audits and supporting Maya's full investigation, at least publicly. That night, Maya stayed later than usual, combing through a backlog of HR files she had been granted access to. One name kept popping up: Evelyn Shaw. Evelyn had worked at Whitaker Enterprises 7 years prior as a junior analyst. Her personnel file showed strong performance, no disciplinary records. But her exit was marked simply, resigned, no cause stated. Maya checked the dates. Evelyn's resignation occurred 3 weeks after she filed a complaint flagged internally as dismissed due to insufficient evidence. There was no follow-up, but there were private notes hidden in the metadata mentioning Langley and a settlement clause. Maya's heart thudded. She searched social media, public records, anywhere Evelyn might have surfaced. Finally, she found her a tiny accounting firm in Vermont, listed as a senior consultant. Maya reached out. To her surprise, Evelyn responded. They spoke the next day over video. I didn't think anyone even remembered me, Evelyn said, her voice soft but steady. I found your file, Maya replied. It was buried, on purpose. Evelyn nodded slowly. They paid me off, not much, but enough to leave. I signed an NDA. Do you still have it? Yes. Would you consider waiving it? Speaking out? Evelyn paused, then smiled bitterly. I already broke it by answering this call. I'll protect you, Maya said. You have my word. Evelyn's voice cracked. I've waited years to hear that from someone. That same day, Maya and Charles scheduled a press conference. It wasn't to brag. It was to confess. They invited past employees, current staff, journalists, community advocates. They stood side by side before a sea of curious eyes and rolling cameras. Charles spoke first. This company, under my leadership, has failed people. People who trusted us, who gave us their labor, their loyalty, and were met with silence. That ends today. Then Maya stepped up. This isn't about one man, one mistake, or one department. This is about a culture that allowed shadows to become systems. I was once a ghost in this building, unseen, unheard. Today, I stand here not as an exception but as a warning. She looked into the cameras. We see you, we hear you, and we're not going back. The applause wasn't thunderous, it was steady, purposeful, real. Later that night, Maya sat by the window in the sunroom, a mug of tea in her hands. Charles joined her, holding 2 envelopes. What are those? She asked. One's from legal. We've finalized new transparency policies. They'll go into effect Monday. And the other? He handed it to her. It was a letter, handwritten, no signature. I was one of them. You don't know my name, but because of you, I can finally breathe again. Keep going, please. Don't stop now. Maya folded the letter slowly. Her eyes misted. I won't, she whispered. I can't. Because some ghosts didn't haunt. Some simply waited patiently for justice to call their names. And now, one by one, they were beginning to speak. Winter tightened its grip around the city, frosting window panes and turning sidewalks into silver mirrors. At Whitaker Enterprises, though, a different kind of chill settled into the air, not from the cold outside, but from the tension growing within the building's upper floors. Maya noticed it first in the silences. Conversations hushed when she entered the break room. Executives who once nodded politely now gave her curt smiles, if they acknowledged her at all. The boardroom felt colder, not from temperature but resistance. Change, she had learned, always came with backlash. Still, she pressed forward. Each morning, Maya arrived an hour earlier than everyone else. She read every report, met with staff from departments that had long been ignored, and followed up on every unresolved complaint. The phrase, Director of People First, wasn't just a title, it had become a mission, a vow to bring light to every corner long kept in the dark. But there were cracks beginning to show. The anonymous emails continued, at first vague, now more pointed. Some things are meant to stay buried, one read. Another, every hero creates a villain. Charles insisted on hiring a digital security team. But the trail was cold, bounced IPs, ghost accounts, no fingerprints. Maya suspected someone inside the building, someone who felt the old way slipping through their fingers. Then came the fire drill. It happened mid-morning, just after Maya had finished a strategy meeting with the department heads. The alarm blared through the corridors, shrill and sudden. Employees filed out with practiced calm, but Maya felt a tightness in her chest. Something about it felt staged. Outside in the bitter wind, she stood with Charles, scanning the windows above. It's not a coincidence, she murmured. He nodded. There's no drill scheduled this month. Someone wanted us out of the building. When they returned inside, nothing was missing. Nothing broken. But in her office, she found her desk drawer slightly ajar. She always locked it. Inside, her notes painstakingly collected testimonies. Confidential printouts had been tampered with. Not stolen, just shuffled. A message. That night, she called Evelyn again. They're getting nervous, Maya said. The pressure's working. Evelyn's voice was steady. Then they're close to breaking. Don't let them scare you into stopping. I won't, but I need backup. I've spoken to 3 others from my old department, Evelyn said. They're ready to talk. If you set up a forum off-site, they'll come. Maya set the date for Friday evening. A quiet restaurant downtown, private room in the back. Word spread quickly. By the end of the week, over a dozen former employees confirmed attendance. The room buzzed with quiet tension that night, lit by low chandeliers and the soft clinking of water glasses. Maya stood at the front, not as a boss, but as a witness. I won't ask you to relive anything painful unless you're ready, she began. But I need your truth. This company can't move forward until we understand how deep the damage goes. One by one, they shared. Stories of intimidation, threats, careers derailed, whispers of cover-ups not just by Langley, but by others' names Maya hadn't seen in her audit. Mid-level managers, legal advisors, even a few board members. A woman named Carla spoke about being demoted after refusing to alter numbers on a diversity report. A man named Jerome described how he trained 3 replacements while being promised a promotion that never came. Another told of a suicide attempt covered up as stress-related leave. Maya wrote everything down. The next morning, she brought it all to Charles. This is no longer about cleaning up policy, she said. This is a reckoning. Charles sat silently, his face pale. How did I not know? Because they needed you not to know. That's how power works, it isolates. He ran a hand through his hair. Then we burn it down, the whole structure. Not burn, she said, rebuild, but we start by removing the rot. Together, they compiled a new list names to be investigated, departments flagged, files reopened. A second audit team was hired, completely independent, answerable to an external ethics board. By Thursday, news of the internal revolution leaked. The media swarmed. Whitaker in turmoil. One headline read. Another, former maid uncovers corporate scandal. Maya's photo was everywhere on news sites, in interviews she never gave, beside words like whistleblower and truth teller. Charles called her into his office, concern lining his brow. "You don't have to be the face of this," he said gently. "I can take the heat." But Maya shook her head. "I've hidden long enough. Let them see me." He smiled sadly. "You're braver than anyone in this building." That evening, as she walked through the lobby, a security guard named Tamika handed her an envelope. "Left at the front desk for you." Maya opened it on the elevator ride up. Inside, a photo, grainy, black and white. Her sitting on a bench outside the hospital weeks ago, holding her mother's hospital bills. No note, no signature. But the message was clear. They knew she wouldn't stop, so they were preparing to fight dirty. She stepped out of the elevator and into her office, where the lights flickered once before steadying. Maya sat down, staring out the window as snow began to fall again, blanketing the city in a false sense of peace. She knew now the fight was far from over, but she also knew this: she had survived worse. Because Maya Williams wasn't just speaking truth to power. She was tearing power's mask away, one thread at a time. Friday morning arrived with a bitter wind and an even colder headline. A major news outlet had published an exposé, citing unnamed insiders accusing Maya of exploiting her position for personal gain. They claimed she was using company funds to reward loyal staff, suggested she was building a political base within the corporation, and hinted that her past employment as a housekeeper was manufactured for sympathy. The article was venom cloaked in civility. The photos were cropped for distortion, the sources anonymous. Maya sat in Charles's office, holding the printed article in trembling hands. "Do you believe this came from inside?" she asked. Charles nodded grimly. "There's no doubt." She stared at the words again. "They're trying to turn the truth into poison." "That means they're afraid," Charles said. "You're changing things. People don't try to assassinate your character unless they see you as a threat. But perception matters," she replied, "especially now." He leaned forward. "Then we show them what real transparency looks like." Later that morning, Maya called a staff-wide meeting, streamed across every floor. She didn't speak from a podium, didn't wear a suit. She stood in the middle of the cafeteria, among the people. "Some of you may have read certain things about me this morning," she began, voice steady. "So, let's set the record straight." She told them the truth, about being a housekeeper, about the night she was fired, about returning not for revenge but for justice, about the investigation, the abuses unearthed, the lives altered. "If caring about fairness makes me a threat, then let me be a threat," she said, eyes sweeping the crowd. "If demanding accountability is political, then let it be political. I'm not here for power, I'm here for you, all of you." There was silence. Then someone clapped. Then more. A ripple turned into a wave. A cafeteria once filled with doubt now rang with affirmation. Afterward, a young administrative assistant approached her. "I've been here 4 years," he said. "No one ever remembered my name until you did." Maya smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I see you. That won't change." Back in her office, Maya found an internal envelope on her desk. Inside was a USB stick. No name, no note. She inserted it into her laptop, fingers tense. The folder inside was labeled Project Icebox. It contained video footage security camera clips dated over the last 5 years. Each one showed scenes of misconduct, executives harassing junior employees, backroom deals, shredding of documents. Some files were tagged with names, most notably several board members and 2 top legal advisors. One video in particular made her stomach twist. It showed Langley in the basement vault, not alone but with a man Maya recognized from the exposé author's social media. They exchanged envelopes, shook hands, smiled. This wasn't just retaliation. It was conspiracy. Maya rushed to Charles's office. She showed him the footage. He watched in grim silence, the lines around his eyes tightening with each second. "We need to go public," she said. "We will," he replied, "but carefully. If we expose them too soon, they'll bury what's left. I don't think we're ahead of them anymore." He turned to her. "Then we find someone who can help us level the field." That afternoon, Maya reached out to Renee Colton, a respected civil rights attorney and ethics watchdog. Renee had built a reputation suing corporations for systemic abuses. She was sharp, unshakable, and, most importantly, impossible to silence. They met that evening at a quiet downtown cafe. "I've heard your name," Renee said, sipping her espresso. "You've stirred quite a storm." "I didn't come to stir anything," Maya replied. "But now I'm in it. I won't stop." Maya shared everything: the documents, the footage, the anonymous threats. Renee listened without interruption, her expression growing colder. "You understand," Renee finally said. "This could bring down more than just a few bad actors. We're talking about dismantling a machine." "I'm ready," Maya said. Renee nodded slowly. "Then so am I." Over the next few days, Renee assembled a legal team, not for a lawsuit, not yet, but for protection. Whistleblower status for Maya, confidential witness outreach, formal complaints filed with the labor board, quiet, methodical steps. But time wasn't on their side. On Wednesday, Maya entered the building to find her ID badge disabled. The security guard at the front desk looked confused but apologetic. "They said your credentials were revoked," he said. "Temporarily." Maya didn't panic. She called Charles. He was already waiting at the front door. "This isn't from me," he said, jaw clenched. "The board called a closed meeting last night. I wasn't invited. They're trying to cut me out. They're trying to erase you before the audit drops." That evening, Charles hosted an emergency press briefing. He stood at the company's media podium, Maya beside him, as he addressed a room full of cameras. "We are under attack not from the outside, but from within," he said. "Certain individuals within this company have gone to great lengths to protect a culture of silence. But that culture is ending." He handed the microphone to Maya. "I was once a maid," she said. "I was once disposable, but the truth isn't. And no matter how many walls they build, truth has a way of leaking through." The next morning, her badge worked again. Someone on the board had blinked. But Maya knew this was far from victory. Because now, the real war had begun, not just for policy or reputation, but for the soul of the company. And the closer she got to the center, the colder the air became. Because beneath every polished surface, beneath every smiling portrait and mission statement, there was a deeper truth waiting to be exhumed. And Maya Williams was holding the shovel. The first snowfall of December blanketed the city in a white stillness, but inside Whitaker Enterprises, nothing was still. The walls hummed with tension. The whispers had grown louder, not just among staff but among investors, clients, and media circles. Something was unraveling and everyone could feel it. Maya walked the hallway with measured calm, though her thoughts stormed beneath her composed face. With Renee's legal team tightening their protective circle, Maya knew she had to act fast. The USB drive had given them leverage, but the story was far from over. Pieces were missing, and someone was still pulling strings from the shadows. She received a message on her secure line. "West Wing Archive Room, 8:45 p.m. Come alone." No name, no number. Maya showed it to Charles. "This could be a trap," he warned. "Or it could be the last piece we need," she said. He hesitated, then nodded. "Text me when you arrive. And don't stay more than 10 minutes. That evening, the building emptied with the usual rhythm. Fluorescent lights dimmed in sections. The cleaning crew began their quiet rounds. Maya took the long way to the West Wing, avoiding cameras, passing only familiar guards. The archive room was dark, lit by a single overhead bulb that flickered like it feared the truth. Rows of file cabinets loomed in every direction. At first, it seemed empty. Then a voice spoke from the far corner. "You're braver than I gave you credit for." Maya stepped closer, heart steady. The man emerged from the shadows, late 50s, gray at the temples, sharp eyes that had seen too much. She recognized him immediately. Jeremiah Kent, former VP of Operations, retired abruptly 3 years ago after a quiet transition. "You were part of it," Maya said. "I was," he admitted. "I helped build the machine you're trying to tear down. Why are you here now?" He sighed, then reached into a leather folder and handed her a manila envelope. "They're preparing to purge the audit before it can be finalized. There's a second server off-site. All the internal investigations, the confessions, the footage, they've copied everything and are planning to wipe the originals." Maya flipped through the documents inside blueprints of the off-site server room, personnel access codes, schedules. "You're helping me now?" He met her gaze. "I've done enough damage in my life. This is the only way I sleep at night. Why tell me this alone? Because I know how they work. They'll try to bury this, then bury you. But if you get this into the public record, they can't bury all of us." Maya nodded. "Thank you." Before leaving, he paused. "I hope someday you forgive yourself for what they made you believe you were." She didn't reply, but his words sank deep. The next day, Maya and Renee set a plan. They would legally file the second server's existence with the ethics committee, while simultaneously preparing a media drop timed with the audit release. It would be a race or reveal. Meanwhile, Charles met with the remaining board members, trying to negotiate from within. But not everyone on the board was on his side. On Thursday, Charles was summoned to a private board session. When he returned, his face was pale. "They're calling a vote," he said quietly. "A vote for what?" "For your termination." Maya blinked. "They want me gone before the audit drops." He nodded. "They're spinning it as destabilizing leadership, claiming you've created a hostile environment." That's rich, considering what we've uncovered." He sat down across from her. "They think if they remove you, the story dies. But they forget something," Maya said, fire returning to her eyes. "This isn't about me anymore. It's about everyone who's been silenced. And they're not quiet now." That evening, Maya called a company-wide assembly. Once again, she stood in the cafeteria, this time with Renee at her side. "I've been told my presence here is disruptive," she began. "And I agree. But disruption isn't the enemy, corruption is." She told them about the off-site server, about the evidence being hidden, about the vote. "If they remove me, they won't stop there. They'll keep sweeping, keep silencing, keep pretending none of this ever happened." Then Renee spoke. "Lawsuits are coming," she said plainly. "Whistleblowers have rights. And now, they have witnesses. If anyone here fears retaliation, know this, you are not alone." When the assembly ended, dozens of employees came forward. Some offered to testify. Others simply thanked her. But Maya noticed one figure watching from the stairwell. Prescott, the CFO. She met his gaze. He didn't look away. That night, a courier delivered a package to Maya's apartment. No return address. Inside was a company badge, Prescott's purses, taped to it, a note. "Check your email." She rushed to her laptop. An encrypted file had been sent 10 minutes earlier. Inside, internal memos, financial transfers, falsified audit logs, proof that board members had not only covered up abuses but had been paying hush money from company accounts. It was enough. The next morning, Maya met Renee at the ethics board's downtown office. Together, they handed over everything: the second server files, the Prescott documents, the original audit. The response was swift. Within hours, a formal investigation was launched. A federal inquiry opened. Subpoenas were issued. Several board members resigned before noon. And that evening, in a final act of defiance, Charles walked into the boardroom and cast the deciding vote. Maya would remain, and the audit would go public. She stood before the press once more, tired but unbowed. "We are not perfect," she said, "but we are no longer silent. And that is the beginning of something better." As the cameras flashed, she glanced down at her hands. The same hands once scolded for touching marble floors, now signing declarations for truth. And she knew the reckoning had arrived. The morning after the audit went public, the world outside Whitaker Enterprises felt different. Maya stood by her office window, watching as news vans lined the street, their satellite dishes aimed skyward like mechanical flowers blooming for scandal. The lobby below buzzed with reporters and protesters alike, some holding signs in support of Maya, others in disbelief at the revelations. Inside the building, however, a strange quiet held. Some employees moved briskly, eyes down, clinging to routine as a shield. Others paused at her door, offering nods, thumbs up, whispered thank yous. Each gesture was a thread, sewing together a wounded fabric of a company long frayed at the seams. Charles arrived, his coat still dusted with snow. "They've frozen several accounts," he said, his voice low. "The SEC wants a full audit of the last 10 years, and the Department of Labor is requesting interviews with over 200 current and former employees. Maya nodded. Good, let it all come out. He placed a hand on her shoulder. You know this won't end quietly. It's not supposed to. There was a knock at the door. It was Tamika, the security guard who had once handed her that mysterious envelope weeks ago. She looked uneasy. There's someone downstairs asking to see you, Tamika said. Says he worked here, before everything. Won't give a name, but he left this. She handed over a torn photo, half of a staff group picture, faded and worn. Maya recognized herself in the back row, holding a tray, wearing the old housekeeping uniform. And beside her, the man who had trained her, Mr. Booker. The first to warn her about Langley. The first to disappear. Maya raced to the lobby. There he was, older now, with a cane and grayer hair, but the same sharp eyes. He stood near the revolving doors, unsure, out of place in his worn jacket and frayed scarf. Mr. Booker? Maya said gently. He turned, and for a long moment, just stared. Then he smiled. Didn't think you'd remember me. He never forgot. They sat in a quiet corner near the cafe, away from cameras, away from the past trying to crash into the present. I heard, he said. Saw your face on the news. Figured it was time to come home. Maya's eyes burned. They said you quit, vanished. No one could reach you. I didn't quit. I was paid off. Threatened. I had a daughter in college, a mortgage. I was told if I didn't disappear, they'd make sure she never got her degree. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small black notebook. I kept records, just in case. Maya flipped through the pages, names, dates, notes in tiny cramped handwriting, whistleblowers, manipulated reports, after-hours meetings in the basement. This is gold, she whispered. It's truth, he said simply. And you earned it. Maya walked him out personally. As they stepped into the cold afternoon sun, a crowd gathered. Someone recognized him. That's Booker, a man called. He used to run building services. The crowd applauded. Booker blushed. Didn't think I'd ever walk through those doors again. You just helped finish what we started, Maya said. Later that day, Maya held another internal briefing. She laid the notebook on the table for the compliance team. This is everything. The final nail. The team got to work immediately, verifying the entries, cross-referencing dates with old email logs, badge swipes, financial transactions. It all lined up. The web was wider than anyone thought. That evening, Maya sat with Renee in the company's legal conference room. We're preparing criminal referrals, Renee said. Multiple executives, 2 board members, and 1 external partner. Maya blinked. External? Renee handed her a file. It was a public relations firm, one that had been quietly feeding false stories to the press, laundering narratives, even coordinating with legal insiders to bury employee complaints. The same firm that had ghostwritten the article accusing Maya of self-promotion. They've done this for years, Renee said. For dozens of companies. Maya leaned back, exhausted but resolute. We're not just fighting a company anymore. We're fighting a system. And you're winning. But victory came with consequences. That night, someone slashed the tires on her car. No cameras caught the act. No note left behind. Just silence and damage. Charles insisted on private security. Maya declined. If they wanted to scare me, she said, they should have tried before the world heard the truth. Still, the team doubled her escorts. Every late-night walk to her car, every off-site meeting. The whispers of violence had grown louder, but so had the support. Letters poured in, handwritten notes from former employees, children of staff who now saw their parents in a new light. One was from the son of a janitor who had been fired 10 years ago for speaking up about racial discrimination. My father died thinking he failed, the letter read. Now I know he was just too early. Thank you for proving him right. Maya cried when she read it. But time marched on. On Friday morning, Maya stood in front of the full staff, every department, every rank. This was the first all-hands meeting in the company's history, where every chair was filled. I won't sugarcoat this, she said. We've been through hell. Some of you may feel ashamed, others angry. That's okay. What matters is that we don't go back. We move forward. She paused, then added, This company can no longer be run by secrets. It must be run by people. Real people. Like you. Like me. Applause followed, not thunderous, but deeply felt. After the meeting, Charles approached. You know the investor meeting's next week, he said. They'll ask what's next. Maya looked out over the bustling floor, at the people who now walked taller, who spoke louder, who believed again. You tell them, she said softly, we're building something honest. That for the first time, this place has a soul. And as she walked back to her office, past portraits of past CEOs and marble pillars once polished by her hands, Maya Williams knew truth had a cost, but dignity was priceless. The boardroom was quieter than usual. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting long shadows over the polished table where Maya now sat no longer as a guest or a visitor, but as a permanent presence. The company had changed. So had she. It had been 2 weeks since the full audit findings were released to the public. National news outlets continued covering the story, but the frenzy had begun to taper. What remained was more profound than headlines, an awakening within the company's walls and beyond. Clients stayed, investors returned, and people, most importantly, stayed inspired. Charles sat beside her, flipping through the agenda for the quarterly investor summit. They want numbers, he said, but I think it's time we give them something else too. Like what? Hope. She smiled. I think I can manage that. Later that morning, Maya stepped onto the summit stage. The ballroom was filled with industry leaders, media, former skeptics, who had come to see if Whitaker Enterprises was still standing or if it was just a headline away from collapse. She looked out over them and began. My name is Maya Williams. You may know my story by now. I was once a maid here. I swept the floors you now walk on, cleaned the offices that once ignored me, and years later, I returned not as a servant, but as a steward. A pause. The room leaned in. This company was sick, not just because of bad leadership, but because of silence. A silence that infected our culture, our systems, our souls. But silence is no match for truth. And truth is what we chose. She spoke of accountability, of rebuilding trust, of creating an employee-led ethics board, new whistleblower protections, and transparency portals available to every staff member. This isn't about me, she concluded. It's about all of us, about choosing courage over comfort, and about proving that even the darkest past can give birth to something worthy of light. She stepped down to a standing ovation. But what moved her most wasn't the applause. It was the face of a young woman near the back, maybe 20, maybe younger, her eyes wide and wet with tears. Maya knew that look. It was the look of someone who had seen herself in a story she didn't believe anyone would ever tell. After the summit, Charles found her near the elevators. You're going to need a bigger office, he teased. I like mine, she replied. It's where the real work happens. That afternoon, she returned to her usual floor, not the penthouse, but the fourth, where HR and community programs were based. She walked past her desk and into the team room where a new initiative was being finalized. The Legacy Project. The idea was simple. Every month, the company would highlight one staff member's journey, their real story, not just roles and resumes, but struggles and resilience. It would be printed in the internal newsletter, shared in team meetings, and displayed in the main lobby. No more anonymous workers, Maya had said when she proposed it. No more invisible hands. The first story featured Tamika, the security guard who had helped Maya countless times, a single mother, a military veteran, and now, the face of the company's new safety reform plan. Tamika cried when she saw it. Thank you for seeing me, she whispered. That night, Maya returned home and found her mother sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea and watching the news. You were on again, her mother said. You look taller. Maya laughed. It's the heels. No, her mother replied, her voice soft. It's the weight you've shed. They sat together for a long time. No words, just the warmth of shared silence. The next morning, Maya received a letter handwritten, no return address. Dear Miss Williams, I used to work at Whitaker. I left when I couldn't take it anymore. I thought no one would ever understand what we went through. But then I saw you, heard you, and I realized we weren't alone. Thank you for giving our stories back to us. L. Maya folded the letter and placed it in her desk drawer. She didn't know who L was. Maybe she never would, but she knew what the letter meant. Redemption, not just for herself, but for everyone who had once felt small in the shadows of tall buildings. As spring arrived, Maya helped launch a scholarship program in honor of former staff who had suffered in silence. The program bore a simple name, Grace, in quiet tribute to the woman she once was, and the many like her. At the dedication ceremony, she stood with Charles, Tamika, Booker, and Evelyn, those who had stood with her through the fire. "This isn't the end of the story," Maya said. "It's the beginning of a new chapter, one where the doors stay open, the voices stay loud, and the truth never gets swept away." A little girl from the crowd walked up and handed her a flower. "For you," the girl said shyly. "My mommy says you're brave." Maya knelt down, accepted the flower, and smiled. "Tell your mommy she's brave too." As the crowd dispersed, Maya stood for a moment longer, letting the sun warm her face. She had come so far, not by fighting alone but by refusing to walk away when it mattered most. Whitaker Enterprises had once been a fortress built on silence. Now, it echoed with voices. And Maya Williams? She had become more than a survivor. She was a symbol, a reminder that truth doesn't whisper. It rings,